The badge says, Custodial Staff. It's clipped to the breast pocket of a gray uniform that smells like industrial detergent and doesn't fit right. The sleeves are too short, the shoulders too tight, the fabric stiff and scratchy against skin that's accustomed to Egyptian cotton dress shirts and jackets tailored on Savile Row. The badge has a photograph on it, a bad one, taken against a white wall in the HR office on the basement level of the building, the kind of photo that makes everyone look like they're being processed rather than employed. The name on the badge is not his name. The name on the badge is Gil Munoz. His actual name is Marshall Adler. He is 51 years old. He is the CEO of Adler Health Partners, a hospital network that operates 11 facilities across the Mid-Atlantic, employs 14,000 people, and generates $2.3 billion in annual revenue. His office is on the 8th floor of the flagship hospital, Adler Memorial, a 12-story glass and limestone building on the corner of Broad and Walnut in Philadelphia that his grandfather built in 1961, and that his father expanded in 1989, and that Marshall has spent the last 9 years turning into what the board calls a nationally recognized center of clinical excellence, and what the staff calls, in the break rooms and hallways and parking garages where the executives don't go, the machine. Marshall knows they call it the machine. He doesn't know why. That's the problem. 3 weeks ago, during a quarterly board meeting, the Chief Human Resources Officer presented the annual Employee Satisfaction Survey. The numbers were bad. Not catastrophically bad, not the kind of bad that makes headlines or triggers investigations, but the kind of bad that sits in your stomach like a stone you can't digest. Nursing staff satisfaction, 34%. Support staff satisfaction, 28%. Voluntary turnover in the last 12 months, 31%. The national average for hospital turnover is 22%. Adler Memorial is 9 points above the national average, which in human terms means that roughly 1 in 3 employees is leaving every year, and the ones who stay are not staying because they're happy. They're staying because the job market is tight and the commute is short and the health insurance covers their kids. What's driving it? Marshall asked. The CHRO, a woman named Devereaux, who had been in the role for 2 years and who delivered bad news with the clinical precision of a surgeon removing a tumor, said, "The exit interviews cite 3 themes: feeling invisible, feeling expendable, and feeling like the administration doesn't understand what happens on the floor." "We do rounds," Marshall said. "I do rounds every quarter." "With respect, sir, you do rounds with the department heads. The department heads show you what they want you to see. You've never been on the floor at 2 a.m. when the night shift is running on 3 nurses instead of 5 because 2 called out and the float pool's empty. You've never been in the break room when the vending machine is the only option because the cafeteria closes at 7 and the night shift starts at 11. You've never seen what the building looks like from the inside of a custodial uniform." Marshall stared at her. Devereaux stared back. She was not a woman who flinched. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "I'm suggesting you stop looking at the hospital from the 8th floor and start looking at it from the basement." Monday, 6 a.m. Marshall Adler walks through the service entrance of Adler Memorial wearing the gray custodial uniform and the badge that says Gil Munoz and carrying a mop bucket that weighs more than he expected. His wedding ring is in his pocket. His watch, a Patek Philippe that costs more than most of his employees make in a year, is locked in the glove compartment of a rental car parked 3 blocks away. His hair, which is normally styled with a precision that his wife calls aggressively intentional, is hidden under a blue baseball cap. He is clean-shaven for the first time in 20 years. Without the beard, without the watch, without the suit, he looks like what he is pretending to be. A man in his 50s who cleans floors for a living. He has been briefed. The custodial supervisor, a man named Trujillo, who is the only person in the building besides Devereaux who knows the truth, gave him a 30-minute orientation that covered the mop, the bucket, the floor buffer, the chemical closet, the radio, the schedule, and the 17 restrooms on the first 3 floors that are his responsibility. "You clock in at 6, Trujillo said. You clock out at 2:30. Lunch is 30 minutes. You eat in the break room on B1 or you don't eat. The cafeteria is for clinical staff." "The cafeteria is for everyone," Marshall said. That's the policy. Trujillo looked at him the way a man who has cleaned hospitals for 19 years looks at a CEO who has just quoted policy. The policy says everyone. The culture says different. You'll see. He sees. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this is the story of a CEO who thought he knew his hospital, until he put on a janitor's badge and discovered he didn't know anything at all. Day 1. The floors. Marshall has never mopped a floor in his life. This is not an exaggeration or a metaphor. He has literally never held a mop. He grew up in Bryn Mawr in a house with staff. He went to Wharton. He went to Harvard Business School. He worked in healthcare consulting for 6 years, then joined the family business and climbed from VP of operations to CEO in 4 years. At no point in this trajectory did anyone hand him a mop. The mop is heavier than it looks. The bucket is heavier than the mop. The floor buffer, a machine the size of a lawnmower that spins a pad at 200 RPM, is heavier than both and has a steering mechanism that responds to input the way a shopping cart responds to a toddler, unpredictably, aggressively, and with a strong preference for walls. He mops the first floor lobby. It takes him 45 minutes. Trujillo told him it should take 20. The floor is 12,000 square feet of white linoleum that shows every footprint, every scuff, every drop of coffee, every wheel track from every gurney and wheelchair that crosses it between 6 a.m. and 2:30 p.m., which is approximately 400 crossings per hour during peak times. The floor does not stay clean. The floor is a war that custodial fights every day and loses every night and fights again every morning. He mops the hallways, he mops the waiting rooms, he mops the restrooms, all 17 of them, each one a small ecosystem of human biology and industrial plumbing that requires a different chemical for each surface and a tolerance for smells that Marshall does not currently possess but is developing rapidly. No one looks at him. This is the first thing he notices, and it is the thing that will define the entire week. He is invisible. Not metaphorically invisible, practically invisible, the way a fire extinguisher is invisible, the way an exit sign is invisible, the way the things that keep a building functional are invisible, because functionality is only noticed when it fails. He mops past doctors, he mops past nurses, he mops past administrators in suits who walk the same hallways he walks every day on the 8th floor. Not one of them sees him, not one of them nods, not one of them steps around the wet floor sign. They walk through it, leaving footprints on the linoleum he just cleaned, their eyes on their phones or their charts or the middle distance where important people look when they're thinking important thoughts. At 11:30, he goes to the cafeteria. He stands in line with his tray, gray uniform, blue cap, badge that says custodial staff. The cashier looks at the badge. Staff cafeteria closes for support staff at 11, she says. It's 11:30. Support staff window is 10 to 11, clinical and admin is 11 to 1. Since when? Since always. Marshall looks around the cafeteria. It's full. Doctors, nurses, administrators, all eating the food that the kitchen prepares with the budget that he approves on the 8th floor. He looks at the sign on the wall. The sign says, Cafeteria Hours, and below that, open to all staff, and below that, in smaller print that someone has added with a label maker, support staff service. 10 to 11 a.m. only. The label maker. Someone made a label. Someone decided that the people who clean the building should eat before the people who run it, and they formalized this decision with a label maker. And no one on the 8th floor knew about it, because no one on the 8th floor eats in the cafeteria. Marshall stands in the cafeteria doorway holding his empty tray. He is the CEO of this hospital. He approved the cafeteria's operating budget in March, a budget that included $2.4 million for food services, a line item that he reviewed for 90 seconds before signing, because the number was within range of the previous year and there were 17 other line items to review, and the meeting was running long. He did not ask who the cafeteria served. He did not ask when. He did not ask whether the people who clean the building, the people who make the building function, who empty the trash and mop the floors and scrub the restrooms so that the doctors and nurses and administrators have a clean environment in which to do their work, were allowed to eat in the room that his budget paid for. He walks away. He doesn't argue. He doesn't say, "I'm the CEO," because he isn't the CEO right now. Right now, he's Gil Munoz, custodial staff. And Gil Munoz doesn't have the authority to question a label maker sign on a cafeteria wall. And that fact, the fact that a label maker has more power in this building than a man in a gray uniform, is the thing that will keep Marshall awake tonight in his hotel room, staring at the ceiling, replaying the cashier's face, replaying the words, "Support staff window is 10 to 11, replaying the way the cafeteria continued to hum and eat and function while a man in a gray uniform walked away hungry because someone put a label on a wall. He goes to the break room on B1. The break room is a windowless room with a microwave, a vending machine, a table with 4 chairs, and a television mounted on the wall that is tuned to a channel nobody chose and nobody watches. The vending machine sells chips, candy bars, and sandwiches wrapped in plastic that have been in the machine long enough to develop the particular sadness of food that knows it will not be enjoyed. The room smells like microwaved leftovers and cleaning solution and the accumulated hours of every tired person who has sat in this room and eaten a meal they didn't want in a space that wasn't designed for comfort but for containment. A room that says you are allowed to rest, but not too comfortably, and not for too long. The chairs are hard plastic. The table has a wobble. The fluorescent light overhead has a buzz that operates at a frequency specifically engineered by the universe to make people feel worse about wherever they are. He sits at the table. He doesn't have lunch. He didn't bring one. The briefing covered the mop and the chemicals, but not the fact that the cafeteria would be closed to him, and his wallet is in the rental car because Gil Munoz doesn't carry a wallet with a black Amex in it. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to share it and subscribe to Untold Hearts, because sometimes the most powerful man in the building is the last one to know what's happening inside it. He is sitting in the B1 break room, staring at the vending machine when she walks in. Her name is Cora. He doesn't know this yet. He won't learn her name until the next day. But she walks in wearing blue scrubs and a stethoscope around her neck, and the particular exhaustion of a nurse who has been on her feet for 10 hours and has 4 more to go. She's in her late 30s. Her hair is dark, pulled back in a braid that is loosened over the course of the shift. Her face carries the remnants of what must be, on a good day, a sharp and direct beauty. High cheekbones, dark eyes that sit deep under brows that have a natural arch, suggesting permanent skepticism. But this is not a good day. This is hour 10 of a 14-hour shift, and her face carries the exhaustion the way a bag carries weight, visibly, structurally, in every line and shadow. Her shoes are the white clogs that nurses wear, the ones that cost $80 and last 3 months, and that she buys with her own money because the hospital's shoe allowance was eliminated 2 years ago in what the CFO's memo called a strategic realignment of non-clinical expense categories. She goes through 4 pairs a year. That's $320 a year in shoes. Shoes that are required for her job, shoes that the hospital used to cover and no longer does, shoes that wear out because she walks an average of 6 miles per shift on linoleum that Marshall has now mopped himself and can confirm is not kind to footwear. She sits at the table across from him. She puts her head down on her arms. She breathes, just breathes. The way a person breathes when breathing is the only thing they can control. Cora has been a nurse for 12 years. She became a nurse because her grandmother, a woman named Rosalind, who raised Cora in a row house in North Philadelphia after Cora's mother left when Cora was 4, had a stroke when Cora was 16, and the nurse who cared for Rosalind in the hospital was the first adult Cora had ever met who combined competence with kindness in equal measure. The nurse's name was Jackie. She was calm and efficient, and she called Rosalind Mrs. Douglas, and she adjusted the pillows and checked the vitals and explained every medication in language that a terrified 16-year-old could understand. And when Rosalind died on the 4th day, Jackie held Cora's hand in the hallway and said, "Your grandmother was loved, and she was comfortable, and she knew you were here." Cora decided, in that hallway, that she would become the person who could say those words to someone else and mean them. She became that person. She is that person. She is also tired in a way that 12 years of nursing doesn't prepare you for, because the tiredness is not physical, it's moral. It's the tiredness of doing a job that matters and being treated like it doesn't. It's the tiredness of watching the hospital cut costs that affect patients and staff, while the executives on the 8th floor approve renovations to the lobby and install new artwork in the boardroom. It's the tiredness of being told you're a hero during a pandemic and then having your shoe allowance cut 6 months later. After a minute, she lifts her head. She looks at him. She looks at the vending machine. She looks at his empty hands. "You didn't bring lunch?" she asks. "I forgot," he says, "and the cafeteria won't serve you after 11. I know, it's garbage." She reaches into the pocket of her scrubs. She takes out a folded $20 bill, a single bill, folded twice, the way people fold money when they know exactly how much they have and can't afford to lose any of it. She puts it on the table and slides it toward him. "Get something from the machine," she says, "and whatever you don't use, keep it. The turkey sandwich isn't terrible if you don't look at it too closely." Marshall stares at the 20. He knows, because he approves the payroll, because the numbers cross his desk every quarter in a spreadsheet that he reads with the detached efficiency of a man who has never been hungry at work, that a registered nurse at Adler Memorial makes $31.60 an hour. After taxes, after the health insurance premium that the hospital increased by 12% last year, after the parking garage fee that costs nurses $140 a month to park in the building where they work, a nurse's take-home pay is roughly $1,900 every 2 weeks. Rent in Philadelphia averages $1,600 a month. Utilities, transportation, food, student loans. The math is the same math it's always been. The math of people who earn enough to survive and not enough to stop counting. This woman, this nurse, who's been on her feet for 10 hours and who just gave her last $20 to a janitor she's never met, is spending money she cannot afford to spend on a stranger who is, in actual fact, the man who sets her salary. "I can't take this," he says. "It's $20. I get paid Friday. Today is Monday." "I know what day it is." She pushes the bill closer. "You're new, right? First week?" "First day." "Okay, first day advice, bring your lunch. The cafeteria thing isn't changing. We've complained about it for 2 years. Nobody upstairs listens." She pauses. "Also, the 3rd floor men's room, the one near radiology. The toilet in the 2nd stall has been running for 3 weeks. Maintenance won't fix it because it's not critical." Meanwhile, it sounds like a waterfall and the patients in the waiting area can hear it through the wall. "I'll look at it." "You're custodial, not maintenance. They won't let you touch it. But I appreciate the thought." She stands up. She picks up her stethoscope from the table and loops it around her neck with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this 10,000 times. She looks at the 20 on the table. She looks at him. "What's your name?" she asks. "Ah, Gil." "I'm Cora. Eat something, Gil. You can't mop on empty." She walks out. Her clogs squeak on the linoleum. The linoleum he mopped 3 hours ago. The linoleum that is already dirty again. The linoleum that doesn't care who mopped it or who walks on it or who sits in the break room below it, deciding whether to accept $20 from a nurse who can't afford to give it. Marshall picks up the 20. He holds it. He puts it in the breast pocket of his gray uniform, next to the badge that says Gil Munoz, and he does not spend it. He will keep this $20 bill for the rest of his life. It will sit in a frame on his desk on the 8th floor, not as a trophy, but as a reminder, a $20 monument to the distance between the spreadsheet and the floor. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, costs nothing, and tells us to keep making stories like this one. Back to the story. Day 2, the night shift. Marshall asks Trujillo to switch him to nights. Trujillo raises an eyebrow, the specific eyebrow of a man who has watched a CEO voluntarily request the shift that nobody wants. But he makes the change. Marshall clocks in at 11 p.m. He clocks out at 7:30 a.m. The hospital at night is a different animal. During the day, the building hums with the organized chaos of a functioning institution. Doctors, patients, visitors, administrators, the constant movement of a machine that processes human suffering with industrial efficiency. At night, the machine slows, the hallways empty. The lights dim to a setting that the facilities team calls overnight ambient and that the night nurses call depression lighting. The sound changes. The daytime roar of voices and pages and elevator bells is replaced by a quieter, more unsettling soundtrack. The beep of monitors, the hiss of ventilators, the distant rattle of a gurney being wheeled to a room that someone will not leave. Marshall sees the building differently at night. He sees the things that the day conceals, the cracks in the foundation that the sun fills with light and the dark exposes. The elevator on the west wing takes 4 minutes to arrive between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. because the hospital runs only 2 of its 4 elevators at night to save on electricity. A decision made by the facilities committee that Marshall approved in a meeting he doesn't remember. A line item in a budget he signed without asking what it meant for the nurse who needs to get from the ER to the 4th floor with a crash cart in less than 4 minutes. He sees the supply closet on the 2nd floor, the one with the sign that says nursing supplies and the lock that requires a key card. The nurses have complained about the lock for a year. It was installed after an inventory audit showed shrinkage, which is the word administrators use for theft, which is the word administrators use for nurses taking home a box of gloves or a roll of gauze because they're treating a family member at home and can't afford the pharmacy price for materials they use every day at work. The lock means that a nurse who needs a fresh IV kit at 2 a.m. has to find the charge nurse who has the key card, who is on the other end of the ward with a patient who can't leave the patient, which means the nurse waits and the patient waits and the IV kit sits behind a locked door because someone in administration decided that preventing the loss of $6 worth of gauze was worth more than 3 minutes of patient care. Marshall writes this down. He has a notebook, a small pocket notebook, the kind that fits in the breast pocket of the custodial uniform, and he fills it during breaks with observations in handwriting that is not the handwriting of a janitor. He writes small and fast, and he dates every entry because the details are accumulating faster than his memory can hold them. And he knows that when he stands in front of the board, the details will matter more than the narrative. The narrative is, the hospital has a problem. The details are the proof. Marshall mops the 3rd floor, the oncology ward. He mops past rooms where patients are sleeping or trying to sleep or lying awake staring at ceilings that he has never looked at from that angle. He mops past the nurses' station where 2 nurses, 2 for a 28-bed ward that is supposed to be staffed with 5, are managing the floor with the grim efficiency of soldiers defending a position they know is undermanned. He recognizes one of them, Cora, the nurse from the break room. The $20. She's at the station, charting. Her face is tight. She has a phone pressed between her shoulder and ear while her hands work the keyboard, entering data into the electronic medical record system that Marshall's administration implemented 2 years ago at a cost of $47 million. The system was supposed to reduce documentation time by 30%. The nurses say it increased it by 50%. Marshall has heard this complaint in meetings, filtered through department heads who translate nurse anger into management-friendly language. The clinical staff is still adapting to the new workflow. What the nurses actually say, what Cora is saying right now into the phone pressed against her shoulder, is different. I need a float nurse for 3 North. I've got 28 beds and 2 nurses. Mrs. Guzman in 314 needs vitals every 30 minutes. She's post-op, she's on a drip, she's confused, and she pulled her IV twice tonight. I can't be in 2 places at once. She listens. I understand the float pool is empty. I'm telling you that 28 patients with 2 nurses is not safe. This isn't a staffing preference. This is a patient safety issue. She listens again. Whatever the answer is, it makes her close her eyes for 3 seconds. A long time when you're a nurse on a short-staffed night shift with 28 patients and a woman in 314 who is pulling out her own IV. Fine, she says. I'll handle it. She hangs up. She sees Marshall, sees Gil, the janitor, mopping the floor outside the station. She doesn't look surprised. She looks like a woman who has moved past the capacity for surprise and arrived at a state of functional numbness that allows her to keep moving. Gil, she says, you switched to nights. Thought I'd try it. Smart. Days are worse. She looks at the hallway he's mopping. Can you do me a favor? Room 314. There's a spill. Mrs. Guzman knocked her water jug off the table. I'd clean it myself, but I've got to get to 307 before the next round of meds. I'll get it. He goes to room 314. Mrs. Guzman is in the bed. A woman in her 70s, small, with silver hair and an IV line taped to her arm, and the disoriented expression of someone who has woken up in a room she doesn't recognize after a surgery she doesn't fully remember. The water jug is on the floor. The water is spreading across the linoleum toward the bed. Marshall mops it up. Mrs. Guzman watches him. "Are you the doctor?" she asks. "No, ma'am, I'm the janitor." "Oh," she's quiet for a moment. "Can you stay for a minute? Just a minute. I don't want to be alone." Marshall leans the mop against the wall. He pulls the chair, the hard plastic visitor's chair that the hospital buys in bulk for $9 apiece, next to the bed. He sits. "My daughter was supposed to come tonight," Mrs. Guzman says. "She works nights. She's a nurse, actually. Not here, at Jefferson. She does the same thing these nurses do. She comes home in the morning and sleeps for 4 hours and gets up and takes care of my grandchildren and then goes back. She's tired all the time. They're all tired all the time." She looks at Marshall. Her eyes are cloudy from medication but sharp underneath, the way water is sharp beneath ice. "You look tired too," she says. "I'm okay." "No one in this building is okay. I've been here 4 days. I watch. The nurses run. They never stop running. They don't sit down. They don't eat. That girl, the one with the braid, she's been here since I came out of surgery and I don't think she's slept." Mrs. Guzman reaches for the water jug that isn't there anymore. Marshall fills it from the sink in the room and hands it to her. She takes a sip. "Thank you," she says, "for cleaning the floor and for sitting. Any time. You know what the difference is between a janitor and a doctor?" she says. "A janitor stops. If Untold Hearts has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. A few dollars a month keeps these stories coming. Links are in the description. Now, back to the story. Day 3, the break room again. Marshall sits at the table in B1 at 2 a.m. He has brought lunch this time, a sandwich from the bodega on Walnut Street, the kind of sandwich a custodial worker would buy, wrapped in wax paper. He is eating the sandwich when Cora walks in. She sits across from him. She has a bag of chips from the vending machine and a cup of coffee that she poured from the pot in the nurses' station, the pot that the night nurses maintain themselves with their own coffee, bought with their own money, because the hospital stopped providing free coffee for staff 2 years ago in what the memo called an alignment of amenity costs with industry benchmarks. "How's the first week?" she asks, eye-opening. "It gets worse." She eats a chip. "Or you get numb, one of the two." "How long have you been here?" "Adler? 7 years. Nursing? 12. I started at Jefferson, then Temple, then here. Adler had the best benefits when I came. They've cut them every year since. The shoe allowance, the coffee, the cafeteria access, the float pool. Every year, something disappears. Every year, someone on the 8th floor sends an email that says, 'We remain committed to our valued team members,' and then cut something else." She looks at him, not at Gil, at him, through him. With the X-ray vision of a nurse who has spent 12 years reading patients and coworkers and administrators, and who has developed the ability to see the difference between what people say and what people mean. You want to know the worst part? The CEO did rounds last quarter. He walked through the ward with the department head in 2 suits, and he shook hands and smiled and said, "Thank you for your service," like we're in the military, and then he left, and nothing changed. The toilet in radiology is still running. The float pool is still empty. The cafeteria still won't service after 11. He did rounds and he saw nothing because you can't see anything from behind a department head who's showing you what you want to see. She takes a sip of her coffee. It is not good coffee. It is the coffee of people who buy the cheapest bag at the store because the hospital won't provide it, and the alternative is no coffee, and no coffee at 2 a.m. on a night shift is not an option. "Sorry," she says. "I'm venting. You don't need to hear this." "I do need to hear it. You're a janitor. No offense, but what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet." She looks at him again. The X-ray look. Something registers. Not recognition, not suspicion, but curiosity. The curiosity of a nurse who has learned to pay attention to the things that don't fit, because in a hospital, the things that don't fit are the things that matter. "You're a weird janitor, Gil." I get that a lot. Most of the custodial guys come in, do the job, leave. They don't ask questions. They don't switch to nights. They don't sit in the break room at 2 a.m. eating a bodega sandwich and asking me about the float pool like they're taking notes. Maybe I'm just curious. Maybe. She finishes her chips. She folds the bag precisely. A habit from nursing, where everything is folded and labeled and organized because chaos in the small things leads to chaos in the big things. You know what I'd change? If I could change one thing about this hospital? What? I'd make the CEO work a shift, not a tour, not a walkthrough with the department heads where everyone's on their best behavior and the supply closets are magically stocked and the bathrooms are suddenly spotless. An actual shift. 12 hours, on the floor, charting, lifting, running, begging the float pool for help, eating chips from a vending machine at 2 a.m. because the cafeteria locked the door 3 hours ago. She stands up. She picks up her coffee. One shift, she says. That's all it would take. One shift and everything would change. Because you can't unsee it. Once you've been on the floor, you can't go back to the 8th floor and pretend everything's fine. The floor gets in your body. It gets in your knees and your back and your feet and your heart, and it stays there. She walks to the door. She stops. Thanks for listening, Gil. I don't usually talk this much. There's something about 2 a.m. in a break room that makes you say things you wouldn't say at noon. 2 a.m. is honest. 2 a.m. is exhausted. Same thing sometimes. She walks out. Marshall sits at the table. He opens his notebook. He writes, one shift. That's all it would take. He underlines it 3 times. Day 5, the reveal. Marshall has been in the gray uniform for 5 days. He has mopped 31,000 square feet of floor. He has cleaned 85 restrooms. He's been ignored by 412 people. He counted, not out of self-pity, but out of professional curiosity, the way a researcher counts data points. He has eaten 9 meals from the vending machine. He has sat with Mrs. Guzman every night for 15 minutes. He's learned the names of 7 custodial workers, 4 night nurses, 2 security guards, and a cafeteria cook named Beto, who slips him a container of rice and beans through the kitchen's back door every night at midnight because Beto understands the label maker policy and considers it a personal insult to his cooking. He's learned other things. He has learned that the custodial staff, the 43 people who clean this 12-story building, make $14.20 an hour. He approved this rate. He signed the budget that said it. He did not, at the time, calculate what $14.20 an hour means in Philadelphia in January. It means a studio apartment in Kensington with a radiator that works half the time. It means a SEPTA pass instead of a car. It means a grocery budget that requires the kind of math his mother never had to do in Bryn Mawr, the kind of math where you choose between fresh vegetables and a winter coat, and the winter coat wins because you can't mop a floor if you're shivering. He has learned that the custodial staff is not invited to the annual hospital gala. He learned this from a janitor named Wilton, a man in his 60s who has cleaned the building for 11 years, who is quiet and steady, and who buffs the lobby floor to a shine that Marshall now understands requires a level of craft that deserves the word skill and not the word labor. Wilton told him on the 3rd night, while they shared Beto's rice in the B1 break room. Every December, they have this big dinner. All the doctors, the nurses, the administrators, they rent the ballroom at the Bellevue. They give awards. They toast each other. We clean up after. You clean up after? We set up the tables. We clean up the tables. We don't sit at the tables. Wilton looked at his rice. 11 years, and I've never eaten at a table in a room that I set up. Marshall wrote that down. He wrote it in the notebook and underlined it twice. He has the $20 bill in his pocket. He has not spent it. He will never spend it. On Friday morning at 7:30, Marshall does not clock out. He goes to the 8th floor. He walks past his executive assistant, who does not recognize him, who looks at the gray uniform and the badge and says, "Can I help you?" in the voice that people use for custodial staff, polite and distant and slightly annoyed, the voice that says you are not supposed to be on this floor without using those words. He walks into his own office. He sits in his own chair. The chair is leather. It costs more than Wilton makes in a month. He sits in it, wearing the gray uniform and the badge and the blue cap and the boots that smell like floor wax and hospital disinfectant, and the leather feels different than it did 5 days ago. Not physically different, morally different. The chair hasn't changed. He has. He picks up the phone and calls Devereaux. "I'm done," he says. "What did you see?" "Everything you told me I'd see. And worse." "Good. The board meets Monday. I've added you to the agenda." "I'm presenting." "I assumed." The board meeting is Monday. Marshall walks in wearing the gray uniform. He does not explain it. He sits at the head of the table in the custodial uniform with the badge that says Gil Munoz and the $20 bill in his breast pocket, and he looks at 11 board members in suits, and he says, "I spent 5 days as a janitor in this hospital. I want to tell you what I learned." The boardroom is on the 8th floor. It has a $12,000 conference table made of walnut, 12 leather chairs that cost $900 apiece, a view of the Philadelphia skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, a coffee machine that makes espresso at the touch of a button, and a catering spread from the Italian restaurant on Walnut Street that includes prosciutto and burrata and focaccia and the specific kind of sparkling water that comes in glass bottles. Because plastic bottles are not aligned with the organization's sustainability commitments. Marshall looks at the catering spread. He thinks about the vending machine in B1. He thinks about the plastic-wrapped sandwiches. He thinks about Beto's rice and beans slipped through the back door at midnight. He pushes the catering spread to the side. "I spent 5 days as a janitor in this hospital," he says again, "and I want to tell you what I learned." He tells them. He tells them about the cafeteria and the label maker. He tells them about the float pool and the 2 nurses covering 28 beds. He tells them about the shoe allowance and the coffee and the broken toilet that has been running for 3 weeks because it's not critical. He tells them about the vending machine dinners and the B1 break room and the windowless room where 14,000 employees are expected to eat. He tells them about the supply closet lock, about the night elevator, about the custodial pay rate of $14.20, and what it means in real dollars in a real city where these real people live. He tells them about Wilton, 11 years cleaning the building, never invited to sit at a table he set up. He tells them about Mrs. Guzman, about a 70-year-old woman who woke up alone after surgery in a room where the water jug was on the floor and the only person who stopped was the janitor. He tells them what she said. The difference between a janitor and a doctor is that a janitor stops. He tells them about Cora, about a nurse who has been at Adler for 7 years and who works the night shift on a ward that is staffed at 40% of what it should be, and who gave her last $20 to a janitor she'd never met because the cafeteria wouldn't serve him after 11, and no one in this room knew that was happening. He puts the $20 bill on the boardroom table. "This is $20, he says. "It was given to me by a nurse who makes $31.60 an hour. She gave it to a janitor because the janitor was hungry, and the hospital that employs both of them has created a system where the janitor can't eat. This $20 represents the distance between what we say on the 8th floor and what happens on the 1st. This $20 is the gap between our mission statement and our building." The room is quiet. 11 board members look at the $20 bill on the table the way people look at evidence, with the specific discomfort of people who are being shown something they cannot unknow. "Here's what's going to change," Marshall says. The list. He reads it from a yellow legal pad that he filled during his 5 nights in the gray uniform. "The cafeteria opens to all staff at all hours. The label comes off today. The float pool is rebuilt. Every ward is staffed to safe ratios by the end of the quarter, or the CNO explains to this board why not. The shoe allowance is reinstated. The coffee is provided. The break rooms on every floor get windows, actual windows cut into actual walls, because no one should eat a meal in a room with no daylight. The restroom maintenance backlog is cleared in 30 days. Every running toilet, every broken soap dispenser, every flickering light. A custodial and support staff advisory council is created. It meets monthly. It reports directly to the CEO, not to HR, not to facilities, to me. And the nurse on 3 North, the one who gave her last $20 to a stranger, gets a raise, not a cost of living adjustment, not a percentage point. A raise that acknowledges that the people who hold this hospital together at 2 a.m. when no one is watching deserve to be paid like they matter. Because they do. They are not expendable. They are the foundation, and this building will not stand without them. He picks up the $20 bill. He folds it twice, the same way Cora folded it when she slid it across the table to a janitor she'd never met. I'm keeping this, he says, not as a souvenir, as a measure. Every decision this board makes from today forward, I'm going to hold it up against this $20 and ask, does this decision move us closer to being the kind of hospital where a nurse doesn't have to give her last 20 to a coworker because the building won't feed him? If the answer is no, the decision doesn't pass. 2 weeks later, the cafeteria. The changes are happening. Not all at once. Institutions don't turn like speedboats. They turn like cargo ships, slowly, with resistance from the water and the wind and the sheer weight of how things have always been done. But they're turning. The label is gone. The label maker policy is gone. The cafeteria is open to all staff, all shifts, 24 hours. The night shift eats at midnight, actual food, hot food, made by Beto and his kitchen crew, who have been given a budget increase and a mandate: feed everyone. The supply closet on the second floor has been unlocked. The keycard system has been replaced with an honor log. You take what you need, you write it down, and if the numbers don't add up at the end of the month, the CNO has a conversation with the floor, not a lock on the door. The elevator runs all 4 cars overnight now. The cost is $1,100 a month in electricity. The savings in response time are incalculable, which Marshall told the CFO, who said, incalculable isn't a budget line. And Marshall said, neither is a patient who codes in a room while the crash cart waits for an elevator. And the CFO approved the electricity. The float pool is being rebuilt. It will take time. You can't hire nurses the way you hire temps, because nursing requires a license and a skill set and the particular kind of courage that allows a person to walk into a room where someone is dying and act like they know what to do, because they do. But the postings are up. The signing bonuses are approved. The goal is full staffing on every ward by the end of the quarter, and Marshall has told the CNO that the end of the quarter means the end of the quarter and not sometime in Q3 when we get around to it. The custodial staff got a raise, $14.20 to $18 an hour. The board approved it in the same meeting where Marshall put the 20 on the table. The raise costs the hospital $340,000 a year. The annual budget is $2.3 billion. The raise is 0.015% of the budget. Marshall presented this number to the board and said, we spend more than this on landscaping for the front entrance. The people who clean the building from the inside should be paid at least as much as the people who trim the bushes on the outside. The gala invitation list has been updated. Every employee, every role, every badge, custodial, kitchen, security, transport, every person who enters the building to work. Wilton will sit at a table this December. He will eat at a table in a room that he set up. This is not a grand gesture. It is a correction. Cora walks into the cafeteria at 12:15 a.m. She stops in the doorway. The cafeteria is full. Nurses, custodial workers, security guards, techs, all eating together at the same tables under the same lights. Beto is behind the counter with a ladle and a smile and a pot of arroz con pollo that smells like someone's mother's kitchen. She gets a plate. She sits at a table near the window. A window, because the cafeteria has always had windows. They were just blocked by storage racks that no one authorized and no one removed until now. Marshall walks in, not in the gray uniform, in his suit, his actual suit, at 12:15 in the morning, because he's been coming to the hospital at midnight every night for the past 2 weeks to see the changes himself, to sit in the cafeteria and eat Beto's rice and beans and watch the night shift, eat a hot meal in a room with windows. He sits across from Cora. He has a tray. He has a plate of arroz con pollo. He has a cup of coffee, the new coffee, the good coffee, the coffee that the hospital now provides for free on every floor because the CEO decided that the cost of coffee was less than the cost of pretending that the people who keep the building alive between midnight and dawn don't need it. Cora looks at him. She looks at the suit. She looks at his face. The face that has changed since she last saw it, not because it's physically different, but because it is no longer underneath a blue baseball cap on a man in a gray uniform sitting in a windowless break room. She recognizes him. Not immediately. It takes 4 seconds, which is long enough for her expression to travel from confusion to suspicion to recognition to something that is not quite anger and not quite surprise, but is somewhere in the territory between the two, the face of a woman who has just realized that the janitor she gave $20 to is the man whose name is on the building. "You," she says. "Me." "You're Marshall Adler?" "Yes." The cafeteria goes quiet. Not silent, the kind of quiet that ripples outward from a table where something significant is happening, the kind of quiet where people stop chewing and start listening. Cora looks at him. Her face moves through several expressions in quick succession, the way a sky moves through weather, clouds forming and dissolving and reforming. Then it settles. "You wore the badge," she says, "for 5 days. You mopped the floors. 31,000 square feet. You sat with Mrs. Guzman. Every night, 15 minutes. And the $20. Marshall reaches into his jacket pocket. He takes out the $20 bill. The same bill, folded twice, the same creases. He sets it on the cafeteria table between them. "I didn't spend it," he says. "I framed it. It's on my desk. It's the most expensive thing in my office, and my office has a $12,000 conference table." Cora looks at the 20. She looks at the cafeteria, full, open, lit, alive at midnight with the sound of people eating a meal they didn't have to fight for. "You changed it," she says. "You changed it. I just had the authority to sign the paperwork. You had the authority that actually matters, the authority of someone who gives away what they can't afford because someone else needs it more." The cafeteria is listening, not eavesdropping, the way that a room full of people listens when something true is being said at a volume that carries. The night shift nurses at the next table have stopped eating. The security guard by the window has set down his fork. Beto has come out from behind the counter and is standing with his arms folded and his ladle still in his hand, and the expression of a man who is watching something that confirms what he has always believed, that the people who work in this building, from the 8th floor to the basement, are all eating from the same kitchen. Marshall looks at the room. He looks at the faces, the nurses, the custodial workers, the security guards, the techs. He looks at Wilton, who is sitting at a table by the wall eating arroz con pollo, and who looks up and meets Marshall's eyes and nods the same small nod that Cora gave him in the break room on day 1. The nod that says, "I see what you're doing, and I accept it." "I'm going to be here," Marshall says, not to Cora, to the room. "Not every night, but I'm going to be here. I'm going to eat where you eat. I'm going to see what you see. And if something's broken, I'm going to fix it. Not because it's good leadership, because it's the minimum, because the people who keep this building alive deserve to eat in it and be seen in it and matter in it." The room is quiet. Then Beto walks back behind the counter and picks up the ladle and says, "You want seconds?" And the room laughs, the particular laugh of people who have been tense and are now not, the laugh that sounds like a door opening. And Marshall says yes, and Cora says yes. And Wilton raises his hand from the table by the wall and says, "Me too." And the night shift goes back to eating. Cora picks up the 20. She looks at it. She puts it back on the table. "Keep it," she says. "You need the reminder more than I need the money." Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that the people who run the building should spend more time mopping the floor, share it. Subscribe to Untold Hearts for more stories about the distance between the boardroom and the break room, and tell us in the comments, what would you want your boss to see if they wore your badge for a week?